The most dangerous secrets are rarely hidden behind locked doors. Sometimes, they are left where an ordinary person can simply bend down and find them. Danielle Brooks almost stepped on the wedding ring. A flash of platinum caught the light beneath table 12 as she reached for an empty champagne glass. Around her, Manhattan's most exclusive dining room still glowed beneath crystal chandeliers, every polished mahogany surface reflecting candlelight and wealth. 20 minutes earlier, the room had been filled with laughter. Now only a handful of guests remained. Danielle bent down. The ring rested beneath the chair where Madison Blake, Ethan Kang's fiancée, had been sitting all evening. It was heavy in Danielle's palm. Cold. Expensive. A wedding band, not an engagement ring. Her eyes immediately moved across the room. Madison was still wearing her enormous diamond. So this wasn't hers. Danielle should have taken the ring to Lost and Found. That was what employees were supposed to do. But something inside the band caught her attention. An engraving. She tilted it toward the chandelier. EK plus RC June 14th, 98. Danielle's breath caught. EK Ethan Kong. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe the truth always finds its way into the light, hit like and subscribe. Now back to Danielle. For 11 months, she had worked at Kong House without asking questions. That was how you survived around men like Ethan Kong. Serve the wine. Clear the plates. Forget what you overheard. At 36, Ethan controlled more than the restaurant bearing his family name. People lowered their voices when he entered. Men twice his age waited for him to speak first. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed tonight in black velvet. He carried power without needing to display it. Danielle had never seen him surprised. Until she looked up. Ethan was standing behind her. His cold eyes were fixed on the ring. Where did you find that? Danielle straightened. Under the table, Mr. Kong. Where? Something in his voice made her pulse quicken. She pointed toward Madison's empty chair. Under your fiancé's seat. Silence. Ethan extended his tattooed hand. Danielle placed the ring into his palm. His expression remained controlled as he examined it. Then he saw the engraving. His thumb stopped. His jaw tightened. For 1 second, the most composed man Danielle had ever met looked as though something from another lifetime had reached through the room and touched him. Sir. Ethan didn't answer. He stared at the date. June 14th, 1998. Then his eyes lifted toward Danielle. Who owned it? I don't know. I only found it. No, his voice was quieter now. More dangerous because of it. Who brought it here? Danielle stared at him. Then a memory surfaced. A woman in a rain-soaked gray coat. A cream-colored envelope. Security moving toward her too quickly. And a name Danielle had heard only once. Rebecca Cole. I saw someone before dinner, Danielle whispered. Ethan became perfectly still. What did she look like? Brown hair. Around 50. Gray coat. Danielle hesitated. She had a scar below her left ear. Something changed in Ethan's eyes. Recognition. But before Danielle could ask what it meant, he turned the ring again. Then he gave a short, humorless laugh. This isn't mine. Danielle frowned. But, EK, I was 8 years old in 1998. Her eyes dropped back to the engraving. EK, if those initials didn't belong to Ethan Kong, they belonged to someone else. Ethan closed his fingers around the ring. And Danielle suddenly understood that she hadn't found evidence of a second marriage. She had found the beginning of a secret that existed long before either of them entered that room. 3 hours earlier, Rebecca Cole had walked into Kong House carrying nothing but an envelope and 20 years of fear. Danielle noticed her because she didn't belong. At 5:47 p.m., the restaurant was preparing for Ethan Kang's private engagement dinner. Crystal glasses lined the tables. White candles burned beneath golden chandeliers. Outside, Manhattan had disappeared behind sheets of cold rain. Then the glass doors opened. A middle-aged woman stepped inside. Her gray coat was soaked through. Brown hair clung to her cheeks, and one hand gripped a cream-colored envelope so tightly that the paper had begun to bend. Can I help you, ma'am? Danielle approached with the professional smile she gave every guest. The woman barely seemed to see it. Is Ethan Kong here? Danielle paused. Employees were forbidden from confirming private reservations. I'm sorry, I can't give out information about our guests. The woman looked toward the private dining room. Then tell him Rebecca Cole came back. Came back, not came by. The difference bothered Danielle. You know Mr. Kong? Rebecca's eyes returned to hers. I knew his family before he understood what that name could cost. Danielle felt a small chill. Before she could respond, two security men emerged from the corridor. Their reaction was immediate. Ms. Cole. Danielle looked at them. They knew her. Rebecca tightened her grip on the envelope. I need 5 minutes with Ethan. You were told not to come here. I've been told many things for 20 years. One guard stepped closer. Please leave. Rebecca didn't argue. Instead, she held the envelope toward Danielle. Give him this. Danielle hesitated. Me? Only him. No one else. Her voice cracked slightly. That was when Danielle noticed the thin scar beneath Rebecca's left ear. Not dramatic. Just a pale line disappearing beneath wet hair. Danielle reached for the envelope. Another hand took it first. Victor Hale. The restaurant manager appeared beside them with his usual immaculate suit and practiced smile. I'll make sure Mr. Kong receives it. Rebecca's face changed. No, Victor slipped the envelope beneath his arm. Ms. Cole, you're disturbing a private event. I said give it to Ethan. And I said I'll handle it. For a moment, Rebecca looked frightened. Then the fear disappeared. Something colder replaced it. You know what's inside. Victor's smile faded. Danielle watched them carefully. I know you're not welcome here. Rebecca stared at him. That's not what I said. Silence. Victor gestured toward security. The guards opened the doors. Cold rain blew across the marble floor. Rebecca stepped outside, then stopped. She turned toward Danielle. Not Victor. Not security. Danielle. Tell him I tried. The doors closed behind her. Danielle remained still. Victor tucked the envelope inside his jacket. Aren't you taking that to Mr. Kong? His eyes hardened. Forget she was here. But she specifically asked, Danielle. His voice lowered. You serve tables. You don't collect other people's secrets. Her cheeks warmed. She nodded. Yes, sir. Victor walked away. Danielle returned to the dining room, but the moment stayed with her. At 6:32, Ethan Kong arrived. 3 minutes later, Madison Blake entered beside him, radiant in ivory silk. Danielle announced their arrival to the staff. Behind Ethan, one security guard leaned toward another. Rebecca Cole showed up again. Madison heard him. Her smile vanished. Only for a heartbeat. Then it returned. Perfect. Beautiful. Controlled. But Danielle had seen the fear underneath it. And before the night was over, she would discover that Rebecca hadn't returned merely to reveal a secret. Someone inside Kong House was already trying to erase the fact that she had ever been there. By 7 o'clock, Rebecca Cole had disappeared from the restaurant. By 7:30, someone had begun erasing the evidence that she had ever entered it. Danielle didn't know that yet. All she knew was that Madison Blake had heard Rebecca's name, and for one heartbeat, the perfect bride had looked terrified. Then the engagement dinner began. Kong House glowed beneath crystal chandeliers and candlelight. Champagne moved from silver trays into delicate glasses. Wealthy guests laughed beneath the soft notes of a grand piano while Ethan Kong sat at the center of the private room in black velvet, silent enough to make louder men watch their words. Madison sat beside him. Beautiful, elegant, perfectly composed. She thanked Danielle by name, complimented the chef, even smiled when a young server nearly dropped a wine glass. Nothing about her looked suspicious. That bothered Danielle more. 20 minutes into dinner, Danielle carried empty glasses toward the service corridor. Madison stood near the east hallway speaking quietly with Victor Hale. Is that camera working tonight? Victor glanced upward. Danielle followed his eyes. A security camera watched the corridor. Why? I saw it flickering. It's fine. Madison's expression tightened. Make sure. Danielle continued walking before either noticed her. Maybe it meant nothing. A woman preparing to marry Ethan Kong had reasons to care about security. Still, Danielle remembered Rebecca. Forget she was here. Later, Danielle entered the ladies' lounge with fresh towels. Madison stood before the mirror, phone in hand. A message illuminated the screen. Unknown. Did anyone see her? Danielle caught the reflection accidentally. Madison typed 2 words. She came. Then deleted the conversation. Danielle's fingers stopped against the linen. Madison looked up. Their eyes met through the mirror. Long evening. Madison asked pleasantly. Danielle forced a smile. Just getting started. Madison studied her. You must see interesting things working here. Mostly empty glasses. A faint smile touched Madison's mouth. Smart girl. She left. Danielle waited until the door closed before breathing normally again. At 8:14, Curiosity finally defeated caution. She found the security technician near the service station. The east hallway camera, is it broken? He frowned. Why? I thought I saw it flickering. He checked his tablet. His expression changed. That's strange. What? Recording stopped at 5:41. Danielle's stomach tightened. Rebecca had arrived 6 minutes later. When did it come back? 6:03, 22 minutes. Exactly enough time for Rebecca to enter, argue with security, hand over the envelope, and disappear into the rain. Can footage just vanish? Not like this. The technician tapped the screen. This segment was manually removed. Danielle stared at him. By who? I need the access log. A voice came from behind them. Is there a problem? Victor. The technician immediately lowered the tablet. No, sir. Victor looked at Danielle. She recognized the warning in his eyes. Danielle returned to the dining room. But now she knew. The missing envelope could be coincidence. The deleted footage could be coincidence. Madison's message could be coincidence. Together, they were something else. Someone wasn't simply hiding Rebecca's secret. Someone was removing Rebecca herself from the story. Then, while clearing Madison's chair. After dessert, Danielle saw platinum shining against the dark carpet. She bent down. A wedding ring. Inside were 3 things. 2 initials. 1 date. EK plus RC June 14th, 98. Danielle's pulse stopped. Across the room, Madison saw what was in her hand. Her champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. And suddenly Danielle understood why the camera mattered. Rebecca Cole hadn't come to Kong House empty-handed. She had left something behind. The ring had already survived 20 years. Now one careless sentence was about to expose everyone who had tried to bury it. Danielle stood beneath the chandelier with the platinum band resting in her palm. Across the room, Madison Blake had gone completely still. Then Ethan Kong appeared behind Danielle. Where did you find that? Under your fiancé's chair. Ethan extended his hand. Danielle gave him the ring. His tattooed fingers turned it toward the light. EK plus RC June 14th, 98. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then his thumb stopped over the date. This isn't mine. Danielle frowned. But the initials, I was 8 years old. The realization moved through her slowly. EK didn't mean Ethan Kong. Ethan looked at the ring again, and something colder entered his expression. My father's name was Eric Kong. Danielle felt the mystery change shape. Eric Kong. Rebecca Cole. EKRC. The woman in the rain hadn't come carrying evidence of Ethan's secret marriage. She had come carrying something connected to his father. How do you know it's really a wedding ring? Danielle asked. Ethan turned the band over. Beside the engraving was a tiny tiger surrounded by 3 stars. My grandfather's mark. His voice was quiet. Every Kong wedding band was commissioned from the same jeweler. Danielle looked toward Madison. She had approached without either of them noticing. What is going on? Ethan closed his hand around the ring. I'm trying to find out. Madison's eyes dropped to his fist. Then she looked at Danielle. Where did she find it? Why? Because someone clearly planted it. Ethan studied her. You seem certain. Rebecca Cole appears after all these years, and suddenly an old ring turns up beneath my chair. Silence. Danielle's pulse quickened. Ethan's face became unreadable. An old ring. Madison blinked. What? I never told you when it was made. Her lips parted. For the first time that evening, no polished answer came immediately. I assumed. Look at the design. Ethan opened his palm. You haven't touched it. I know your family's jewelry. Do you? Madison's composure tightened. This is exactly what she wants, Ethan. Rebecca wants you suspicious and angry. Danielle watched Ethan's eyes sharpen. I never told you Rebecca brought it. Another silence. Madison looked toward Danielle. That was her second mistake. Ethan saw it. Tell me what you know. Nothing that matters anymore. Let me decide that. Madison's voice lowered. Your father is dead. Whatever happened should have stayed buried with him. Ethan placed the ring on the mahogany table. The small metallic click seemed to cut through the entire room. Whatever happened? Madison exhaled. Then frustration finally broke through her perfect expression. She should have destroyed that 20 years ago. Nobody moved. Danielle felt the words settle between them. 20 years. Madison knew exactly how old the ring was. Exactly who had carried it. And exactly what someone had expected Rebecca Cole to destroy. Ethan stared at the woman he was supposed to marry. When he spoke, his voice was almost gentle. That made it worse. Who is she? Madison said nothing. Ethan stepped closer. Rebecca? Her silence answered for her. Danielle looked at the ring beneath the chandelier. Minutes earlier, it had seemed like evidence of a forgotten romance. Now it looked like evidence of a cover-up. Ethan reached for his phone. Lock down the security records. Preserve every access log from tonight. Madison's face lost its color. Ethan, don't. He looked at her. Why? She couldn't answer. And that was when Ethan Kong understood something far more dangerous than his father's hidden past. The woman he planned to marry already knew the secret. She had simply never expected him to find the ring. Rebecca Cole returned to Kong House at 10:17 that night. This time, nobody asked her to leave. The rain had softened to a cold mist. When Ethan's security team found her sitting alone inside a 24-hour cafe across the street, she had never gone home. She had simply waited, watching the restaurant windows as though she knew the past would eventually force someone to come looking for her. When the private dining room doors opened, Rebecca entered slowly. Her gray coat was still damp. Her eyes went first to Danielle, then to the platinum ring resting beneath the chandelier. You found it. Danielle nodded. Rebecca closed her eyes for a moment. Not relief. Grief. Ethan stood at the opposite end of the mahogany table. Madison remained near the windows, pale and silent. Sit down, Ethan said. Rebecca didn't. I've spent 20 years being told where to sit, when to speak, and which version of my life I'm allowed to remember. Ethan studied her. Then stand. Rebecca almost smiled. Almost. He picked up the ring. This belonged to my father. Yes. Eric Kong. Yes. And these are your initials. Rebecca looked at the engraving. Rebecca Cole. Ethan's jaw tightened. Danielle could feel the question before he asked it. Were you sleeping with my father? Madison turned away. Rebecca did not. No. Were you his mistress? No. Then explain why your initials are inside his wedding band. Rebecca's eyes glistened. For the first time, her voice trembled. I wasn't your father's mistress. She paused. I was his wife. The room went silent. Ethan didn't blink. Danielle felt her fingers tighten against the back of a chair. Madison whispered, Rebecca, don't. Rebecca turned toward her. Your family has said that to me for 20 years. Then she reached inside her coat. Security shifted immediately. Ethan raised one hand. Let her. Rebecca removed an old photograph and placed it on the table. The edges were worn soft with age. In the picture, a younger Eric Kong stood outside a courthouse in a dark suit. Rebecca stood beside him wearing a simple ivory dress. Flowers in one hand. Her other hand wrapped around his. And on Eric's finger was the same platinum band now lying between them. Ethan stared at the photograph. June 14th, 1998, Rebecca said. We were married that morning. My parents married in 2001. I know. So you divorced him. Rebecca's expression changed. No, one word. Quiet. Devastating. Ethan looked up. What do you mean, no? There was no divorce. Madison stepped forward. This proves nothing. Old photographs, an engraved ring. I had more. Rebecca's voice hardened. Marriage records. Filing receipts. Certified copies. Ethan caught the tense. Had. Rebecca looked toward Madison. People with powerful names made them disappear. Danielle remembered the missing envelope. The erased footage. Victor's warning. Forget she was here. Ethan's hand flattened against the table. Why would the Blake family care who my father married? Rebecca took a long breath. Because years later, their law firm helped make my marriage disappear. Madison's face drained of color. Ethan saw it. But Rebecca wasn't finished. There was one person at that firm who refused to cooperate. Danielle felt something shift. Rebecca turned toward her. Not Ethan. Her. A young paralegal found the original record. Danielle's pulse quickened for reasons she couldn't explain. She was told to destroy it. Rebecca reached slowly into her coat again. This time she removed a yellowed newspaper clipping. She refused. She slid it across the table toward Danielle. Danielle looked down, and the world seemed to stop. A young black woman was pictured leaving a law office with a cardboard box in her arms. Danielle knew the face immediately. That's my mother. Danielle Brooks had seen that photograph before, not in a newspaper. In a shoebox beneath her mother's bed. Elaine Brooks stood outside a Manhattan law office with a cardboard box pressed against her chest, her shoulders straight despite the reporters gathered around her. Danielle had been 8 years old when that picture was taken. Too young to understand why her mother suddenly stopped wearing business suits. Too young to understand why the apartment grew quieter after that. too young to understand why Elaine never worked in law again. Danielle lifted her eyes from the clipping. What does my mother have to do with your marriage? Rebecca's expression softened. Everything. Ethan remained silent. Across the table, Madison did not. This has gone far enough. Danielle turned toward her. Madison's face had lost every trace of the warmth she'd worn during dinner. Rebecca is taking unrelated events and building a story around them. Rebecca gave a tired laugh. Then tell Danielle why Elaine Brooks was fired. Madison said nothing. Danielle's pulse began pounding. My mother told me she made a mistake. She didn't. Rebecca's answer came immediately. She found something powerful people needed erased. Danielle looked down at the clipping again. Elaine had worked as a junior paralegal at Whitmore, Blake & Pierce, the firm that handled private legal matters for both families. In 2001, she had been assigned to archive records connected to Eric Kang's upcoming marriage. That was when she found Rebecca's certificate. Signed, filed, legal, and never dissolved. She brought it to a senior partner, Rebecca said. She thought it was an administrative problem. What happened? They told her to remove it. Danielle frowned. Remove it. Destroy the original. Replace the internal record. Make it look like Eric and I had never legally married. The room seemed colder. My mother refused. Rebecca's eyes filled. Your mother said records weren't supposed to change because rich people disliked what they proved. Danielle closed her eyes. That sounded like Elaine. Stubborn. Quiet. Impossible to frighten once she believed something was wrong. What did they do to her? Rebecca hesitated. Ethan's voice came low across the table. Tell her. 3 days later, confidential client documents were found in Elaine's desk. Danielle stared at her. No, they accused her of stealing them. No, she was dismissed. The accusation followed her everywhere she applied. Danielle stepped backward. Memories came without permission. Her mother filling out applications at the kitchen table. Rejection letters. Night shifts. Cleaning offices whose legal departments would never hire her. And apologies. So many apologies. I'm sorry, baby. I made a mistake. Danielle had spent 20 years believing those words. Her eyes moved slowly toward Madison. Your family did that. I was 11. That wasn't my question. Madison's jaw tightened. You have no proof. Rebecca reached into her coat. I didn't. She placed a small brass key on the table. Elaine did. Danielle stared at it. What is that? 6 months before your mother died, she called me. Danielle stopped breathing. Rebecca pushed the key toward her. She said she had kept one copy of the original marriage record. She was afraid to use it while you were young. Later, she was afraid nobody would believe her. Danielle touched the key. Where? A safe deposit box. The answer landed quietly. Rebecca looked at her. She told me that if the Kong and Blake families ever joined through marriage, I should find you. Across the table, Ethan's expression hardened. His engagement was no longer separate from the old cover-up. It was the reason the truth had returned. Danielle closed her fingers around the key. For 20 years, she had believed her mother lost everything because she had done something wrong. Now she understood. Elaine Brooks hadn't destroyed her career. Someone else had destroyed it because she refused to destroy the truth. And suddenly Danielle wasn't merely the waitress who found the second wedding ring. She was the daughter of the woman they had turned into a liar. For 20 years, Danielle Brooks had believed her mother's silence was shame. Now she understood it had been survival. The brass key sat inside her closed fist as memories rearranged themselves one by one. Elaine filling out job applications after midnight. Elaine removing the word paralegal from her resume. Elaine cleaning office buildings where women half her age walked past carrying legal files she had once been trained to handle. And every time Danielle asked what happened, her mother gave the same answer. I made a mistake. Danielle looked at Rebecca. She knew she was innocent. Why didn't she fight? Rebecca lowered her eyes. She tried. Those 2 words hurt more than Danielle expected. The firm controlled the story before she could tell hers. They had internal reports, witness statements, documents supposedly recovered from her desk, planted documents. Yes. Danielle turned toward Madison. You knew. Madison's face tightened. I knew there had been an employee investigation years ago. I didn't know every detail. Rebecca laughed bitterly. Your father signed the termination recommendation. Silence. Madison looked away. Danielle felt anger rise, but it wasn't loud. It was colder than that. For years, Elaine had carried humiliation that belonged to people sitting in rooms like this one. People with expensive lawyers, private security, Family names powerful enough to turn lies into official records. What happened after she was fired? Ethan asked. Rebecca looked at him. No major law firm would touch her. Danielle already knew the rest. Elaine worked temporary jobs, then reception desks, then nights cleaning corporate offices. She raised Danielle without ever telling her that the career she'd lost had been taken from her. She protected me, Danielle whispered. Rebecca nodded. Elaine believed that if she fought publicly, the people who framed her might come after the only thing she had left. Danielle's throat tightened. Me? Yes. Across the table, Ethan stared at the wedding ring. His father's secret had once seemed like a family scandal. Now he saw the cost measured in someone else's life. My father knew, he asked. Rebecca hesitated. I can't prove what Eric knew about Elaine. The answer mattered. Danielle looked at Ethan. Rebecca continued. I won't turn suspicion into fact. I know the Blake firm handled the records. I know Elaine refused to destroy mine. I know she was framed afterward. Anything beyond that needs evidence. Ethan gave a slow nod. For the first time that night, Danielle appreciated what Rebecca had not done. She hadn't exaggerated. She hadn't turned pain into accusation where proof ended. That made everything she could prove feel heavier. Danielle opened her hand and stared at the key. My mother kept the original copy all these years. A certified copy, Rebecca said. And she told me she kept something else. What? Her notes. Danielle looked up. Names. Dates. Instructions she was given. Everything she remembered from the week she was fired. Madison went pale. Ethan noticed. So the safe deposit box doesn't just prove Rebecca's marriage. Rebecca shook her head. It may prove who ordered the cover-up. The room fell quiet. Danielle remembered her mother's Bible. A small piece of tape inside the back cover. An empty outline where a key had once rested. Elaine had left behind more than evidence. She had left Danielle a choice. Keep living with the story powerful people had written about her. Or finally open the box. Danielle slipped the brass key into her pocket. When does the bank open? 8:30, Ethan said. Danielle met his eyes. Then I'll be there at 8:30. I'll send security. No. Her answer surprised everyone. Danielle stood straighter. My mother spent 20 years being treated like she couldn't be trusted with the truth. She glanced at the ring. This part belongs to me. Ethan studied her for a long moment, then stepped back. Understood. And for the first time since Danielle had entered his world, the Korean Mafia Boss did not use his power to take control. He used it to let her keep hers. At 8:31 the next morning, Danielle Brooks opened the box her mother had spent 20 years protecting. The bank employee placed the narrow metal container inside a private viewing room and quietly closed the door. Danielle stood alone. No Ethan Kong. No security. No Rebecca. Just her, the brass key, and whatever remained of Elaine Brooks's truth. Her fingers trembled as she turned the lock. Inside were no diamonds. No hidden money. Only paper. A thick brown envelope. A notebook wrapped in faded blue cloth. And a photograph of Danielle at 8 years old. She picked up the photograph first. On the back, written in her mother's handwriting, were 7 words. For the reason I chose to survive. Danielle closed her eyes. Then she opened the envelope. The first document carried an official seal. Certified copy of marriage registration. Eric Kong. Rebecca Cole. June 14, 1998. Danielle stared at the date. The ring had told the truth. Now the paper proved it. Beneath the certificate were photocopies of internal memoranda from Whitmore, Blake, and Pierce. One instructed Elaine to remove the Cole marriage record from the Kong archive pending client-directed correction. Another, dated 2 days later, warned that failure to comply would constitute insubordination. Then came Elaine's notebook. Names, dates, meeting times, instructions. Every page written carefully, as though she had known someone might one day need to reconstruct what happened. Danielle reached the final entry. They want me to destroy the original trail. I won't. If they fire me, Danielle may someday think I failed her. I pray she learns that losing your job is not the same as losing your integrity. Danielle covered her mouth. For 20 years, her mother had apologized for failing. She hadn't failed. She had refused. By noon, Danielle was back at Kong House. Ethan waited in his private office. Madison was there with 2 attorneys. Rebecca stood near the window. Danielle entered carrying the brown envelope. Nobody spoke. She placed the marriage certificate on Ethan's desk. Then the memoranda. Then Elaine's notes. One attorney adjusted his glasses. If these are authentic, they are, Danielle said. Her voice was steady. Ethan read silently, page after page. His expression grew colder with each one. Finally, he reached a memorandum bearing the signature of a senior Blake partner. Madison stepped forward. Ethan, whatever happened 20 years ago, destroying our families now won't undo it. He looked at her. Our families. You know what I mean. No, I know what you're asking. His voice remained calm. You're asking me to benefit from the same silence that destroyed her mother. Madison's face tightened. This could damage everything your father built. Ethan looked toward Danielle. For the first time, the choice was completely visible. He could lock the documents away. Protect the Kong name. Protect the engagement. Protect the empire. Danielle didn't beg. She didn't threaten him. She simply pushed Elaine's notebook across the desk. Now you know what your family did to mine. Ethan looked down at the handwriting, then at the second wedding ring beside it. For years, his world had taught him that power meant controlling what other people were allowed to know. But Elaine Brooks had possessed no power, no fortune, no armed men, only the courage to refuse one order. And 20 years later, that refusal had outlived everyone who tried to erase it. Ethan picked up his phone. Madison's breathing changed. Ethan. He ignored her. Call independent counsel and an outside investigator. Madison stared at him. What are you doing? Ethan's eyes settled on the evidence. Something my family should have done 20 years ago. He paused. I'm telling the truth. 3 weeks later, Danielle Brooks returned to the private dining room where she had found the second wedding ring. This time, she wasn't carrying a tray. A chair was waiting for her. The chandeliers still glowed above polished mahogany. The crystal glasses were still arranged with impossible precision. But there was no champagne, no engagement dinner, no celebration. Only lawyers, independent investigators, Rebecca Cole, Ethan Kong, and the truth. On the table lay the platinum ring, Rebecca's certified marriage record, Elaine Brooks's notebook, and the documents that had destroyed an innocent woman's career. The investigation had confirmed enough. Elaine had not stolen confidential records. Evidence had been placed in her workspace after she refused to remove Rebecca's marriage documentation. Whitmore, Blake, and Pierce had agreed to formally withdraw the accusation, correct Elaine's employment record, and acknowledge that her dismissal had been based on fabricated evidence. Danielle listened without moving. 20 years. Her mother had waited 20 years for words that arrived 3 years after she died. One attorney cleared his throat. Ms. Brooks, the firm is prepared to discuss compensation. Danielle looked at Elaine's notebook. How much? A substantial amount. That isn't what I asked. The attorney hesitated. Danielle pushed the settlement folder aside. I want her name corrected everywhere your accusation followed her. We can arrange, not quietly. The room went still. Danielle met his eyes. You destroyed her reputation publicly enough that she couldn't find work. Clear it the same way. Across the table, Ethan watched her. The attorney nodded slowly. We'll issue a formal statement. Danielle touched the edge of her mother's notebook. Put my mother's name back where it belongs. Ethan spoke before anyone else could. Done. There was no applause. No triumphant music. Just silence. Quiet justice didn't need an audience. Madison Blake never returned to Kong House. Ethan ended the engagement. The morning investigators confirmed that members of the Blake firm had continued suppressing information about Rebecca's marriage. When Madison asked whether he would destroy 2 families over something that happened decades ago, Ethan gave her only one answer. No, I'm refusing to build another generation on it. Rebecca's marriage was formally recognized in the family records. Elaine's accusation was withdrawn. Her professional history was corrected. And Danielle accepted compensation based on the wages and retirement benefits her mother had reasonably lost. Nothing more. I don't want your family to buy forgiveness, she told Ethan. I know. Months later, the platinum ring was placed beside copies of the recovered documents in the Kong family archive. Not as a symbol of love, as evidence. Proof that a lie could survive for decades and still lose to someone who refused to destroy the truth. Late one evening, Danielle finished her shift. Rain had just stopped outside. Manhattan shimmered beyond the glass doors, streetlights reflected across the wet pavement. She stepped toward the entrance. Danielle. She stopped. Ethan stood behind her in his black velvet suit, his tattooed hands relaxed at his sides. For 11 months, he had called her Miss Brooks, sometimes simply waitress. Never Danielle. She turned. His expression was different now. Still controlled. Still difficult to read. But no longer looking through her. Your mother deserved better. Danielle held his gaze. Once, she might have thanked him. Instead, she answered with the truth. She deserved the truth. Ethan lowered his eyes. A small nod. Danielle opened the door. Cool night air touched her face. Then she walked into the city without looking back. Behind her stood a man who had inherited wealth, fear, and a family name powerful enough to erase people. But a black waitress had taught him something his empire never could. Power could protect a lie. It could even make that lie survive 20 years. But dignity belonged to the person who refused to surrender the truth. And that night, Elaine Brooks finally got her name back.